I know, yeah, that was very nice.
All right, well, thanks for coming. Out of respect for you who are here on time, it is 2:01 or 2:01, so we're going to go ahead and get started and call the meeting to order. In the future, the chair will be calling the meeting to order, and you'll notice in the agenda, the last action today is to nominate a chair and a vice chair. Before we do roll call, out of respect, we have two members who might be just coming a little bit late. I know Mayor Kling would like to bring some greetings, so at this point, would like to have Mayor Kling come and bring some greetings to the group. Here you go, Mayor.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to each and every one of you for raising your hand and being willing to serve. It is really appreciated. This is an important task, and I know Rick has done a great job from the beginning in identifying, right, the ordinance and just working on the foundation, but I want to say thank you. I know it takes time out of your busy schedule as we guide and direct the city and make a decision about how we go about building these districts. So thank you to the staff that's here to support and serve, legal that's here to give us guidance, but to you, our citizens, I really appreciate your willingness and the fact that you've raised your hand and stepped up. So I just wanted to say thank you. I'm not an official part of this meeting. I am going to sit in and listen some when I can at the different meetings, but other than that, I'm just here as an observer. So thank you, Rick. Thank you for the excellent job you've done. You've laid a really good foundation to get started. Needless to say, you know who your point of contact is. If there's something else that you need, Rick is happy to support you as you move forward in this process. So thank you, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you. All right, and I think we're fully assembled. So what I'd like to do now is have the clerk take roll call, and then we'd go around and maybe do some brief introductions, since this is our first meeting. So go ahead. You can speak loud. Here, I'll direct it towards you. There you go.
Johnson.
Here.
Castaneda.
Here.
Berlin.
Here.
Benz.
Here.
Tuck.
Here.
Booz.
Here.
Minnick.
Here.
Zorick.
Did you say Zornick?
Zornick.
Yes, I'm here.
Cleaver. Yes. All present.
All right. Great. We got 9 out of 9 for the first meeting. So I'm glad all of you were checking your calendar invite. One of my assistants is Jonica Johnson, and she's been a help on the administrative side of just getting the invites out for logistics. Just brief housekeeping. You likely have seen that there's a calendar invite for 4 meetings that span over, and thanks for getting us your schedules back. And it was a little bit of a challenge to try to find a time that would accommodate everyone, and I'm glad that all 9 of you are present. We're going to try to do all of them on Tuesdays, as you'll note in the logistics. Depending on how much we get done in the meetings, we should, I think, we've never done this before, but I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll be done for the most part within those 4 meetings, with the 4th meeting being a wrap up after a couple open houses to get some public feedback. So I was thinking we'd go around and introduce ourselves so that you know who's present, and maybe start, Craig, with you hiding out over there, and tell us your role in the process here, and your name and title and role. We'll go around.
My name is Craig Tarter. I'm the GIS supervisor. GIS is structured underneath engineering, which is a part of Public Works, but we do provide mapping services for the entire city and all workflows. So we're here to assist with some of the maps and some of the content you guys are going to help create.
Excellent. And we're going to hear from Craig a little bit later as staff. He's going to kind of show us the GIS dynamic mapping that they have. That will be one of the most critical resources in our work as a group. So maybe we can work our way to the table. Start with you and work our way.
My name is Brandy Long. I work for Canyon County Elections. Have been there for 5 years. So I'm just glad to be here to help my supervisor and my other supervisor, my boss over here, and you guys along with the process.
Oh, sorry, the mic. Okay, you can speak into that mic there.
The sound's good.
This sounds good. Okay.
I'm loud. I'm good.
I am Haley Hicks. I am the election supervisor for Canyon County.
Chris Yamamoto, Canyon County Clerk Auditor.
Rodney Ashby, Planning and Zoning Director for the City of Nampa.
Nathan Cleaver, I'm a citizen civil engineer, and I'm on 4 committees, I think. Seems about right.
And what do you do for a living?
Civil engineer, partner at Keller Associates.
Is this on? Can you guys hear me okay? My name is Stephanie Binns. I live here in Nampa, have lived here for a while. I used to teach, so that's where my heart and my passion lie, but software pays the bills. So that's what I do now.
Matt Johnson, I'm an attorney with White Peterson Law Firm here in Nampa. I'm also chair of the Nampa Chamber Government Relations Committee.
My name is Adrian. I'm the data and tech specialist for Spark Strategic Solutions, and I've lived in Nampa the majority of my life.
Okay, my name is Ray Booz, one-year resident here of Nampa, retired last year after 37 years with my own federal firearms license as a gunsmith, and want to be involved in the community and see just what's going on.
Troy Minnick, I'm the pre-treatment coordinator for the city of Napa, but I am here as a citizen, and so I look forward to being a part of Napa in more ways than just my involvement as being an employee.
I'm Jane Zornick. I'm a retired educator. I did spend 8 years at the Idaho State Department of Education, and I worked 2.5 years in the city of Boise in their public library system. Now I guess I'm a retired citizen, and I've lived in Nampa a couple years, and just kind of yearning to get to know my new community and to see ways in which I can serve.
My name is Tony Berlin. I currently work in healthcare here in Nampa, and I just thought this would be a great opportunity to get involved. I live just a few blocks away, so.
Kathleen Tuck. I live in Southwest Nampa. I've been here 5 years. Before that was in Ada County for many, many years. And my day job is for the Nampa School District doing communications.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Amy Bowman. I'm also a Nampa resident, but my day job is working as the Director of Communications for the city.
Todd Lakey, also a longtime Nampa resident. Actually, we live just slightly in the county now, but I'm here as city attorney.
I'm Rick Kogabo. I serve as chief of staff. Prior to that, I was on city council. I've been a citizen here since 2008.
And I'm Sharp Cham. I'm the city clerk for Nampa.
And then Mark on IT. Yes, man of few words, or no words.
Mark Davis, City of Nampa IT.
Okay. And these meetings, for your information, are being recorded and streamed, so they will be archived, which will be a helpful resource for those of you if you want to go back to a meeting and try to recapture something that might have been said. These will be archived for your record. And then we've heard from Mayor Kling. Is there anything else you want to add about yourself, other than being mayor?
Nope.
Okay.
Love our community, and I'm excited to, I guess, to meet everybody and I've gotten to meet different ones at different times, so it's wonderful to hear who they are.
Did you want to sit up here?
Oh, no, that's fine.
Sure. Okay.
Sorry, I'm not mic'd, so I'll be quiet.
Okay. So again, thanks for coming. This is the first time we've done this, and I thought, and I know this might be a slow, methodical walk through what brought us here, but I think it's always important in order to define the destination, we need to identify what the why, and before we get to the what of the work that's before us. So I've asked in legal, Todd Lakey, who does serve as the city's legal. He's also a state senator, so I think he had a hand somewhat in the bill, is familiar with the legislation, but there was state legislation that was passed a couple sessions ago that required that cities that had 100,000 or more citizens had to vote for their city council members by district. So I was going to turn it over to Todd to kind of give us just a brief review summary of what that statute is for our information before we get into the ordinance. So
Okay.
I'm going to turn the mic, or there's a mic right there.
Got one here. Thanks, Rick. So I guess just to be semi-frank, I think the legislation itself was kind of driven by the situation in the city of Boise, and you kind of hate to see legislation across the state based on one situation, but they had a good percentage of their city council that lived in very close proximity to one another. So that, I think, was the impetus of the legislation to try to spread the representation in larger cities around the city. So there was a good representation of portions of the community, population, more, I guess, diverse perspective on the city council. And so that's kind of the background of the statute itself. And the statute doesn't provide as much detail and nuts and bolts as the ordinance itself, but it does lay out a couple of things. It says you have to come up with the districts, you designate those districts, it gives you some timelines in relation to elections, but it provides two particular criteria. It says that each district shall consist of one or more contiguous election precincts as established pursuant to the provisions of Chapter 3, Title 34, Idaho Code, which is the county commissioners establish those precincts as part of the census every 10 years when we get that new data. So that's, it's tied to that, and that's a mandatory provision. It says, thou shalt use contiguous election precincts. So that is the first provision that I look at as a mandatory requirement. And then it says each district shall, but with the proviso, to the nearest extent possible, contain the same number of people based on the most recent federal decennial census. So you need to look at entire precincts, and then you need to try to make sure that the population within each district is equivalent. But I think that last provision is qualified by the first one. So you need to keep the precincts intact. You will see as we go over the precinct maps that they don't always follow city boundaries. So that's part of what you need to consider. But you do need to keep those intact, and then you strive for equivalent population among districts.
You have a question?
Yeah, so what if the contiguous part and the balance of numbers part are mutually exclusive? So what if you have two highly populous districts that would be, that there are no smaller districts to join with, that precincts to join with them to balance them out, but together they are too heavy? How does that work?
So I guess we'll kind of have to cross that bridge as you dig into it. But my advice is to keep the precincts intact, and then you try to work the boundaries to make those population numbers as close as you can. If you get to some kind of absolute cannot do it, then we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there. But the good thing, the good thing about the city is you've got, it's a populated area within the city limits. So hopefully the numbers can work out among the precincts without having to divide anything up reasonably close. Good question.
Yeah, Adrian?
I was just going to ask, as far as in the populations for this, what date are these, what year are these based on?
Most recent census.
Who established the precinct boundaries?
County.
And maybe it would be helpful at this time, County, could you maybe just give a brief, the update on the census, because these are good questions. When the most recent census was done, and then the work on the precincts that you just did, what's notable?
Take the lead on this? Yeah, I can. So we received the census, I don't know, can you guys hear me okay? I want to make sure, I'm not near a mic, so. When we received the census data, what we did was we took that census data, and it's broken up obviously in census blocks. Upon that, we divided it the best we could, considering the amounts of growth. We considered that, in countywide, we are considering, lower part of Nampa is definitely growing. Upper part, near Middleton, that's growing as well. So we took that in consideration for the possible growth. We broke that into the best we could, sizable, because we have certain requirements to keep them such size within our polling locations. So that's something else that we had to consider as well. And so we broke it up the best we could within our polling locations, and without moving boundaries too incredibly much, but we also have to follow legislative districts. So we do have a lot of those guidelines that we have to meet. Any other questions? Yeah.
So there seems to be a number in red, which is, I'm assuming, population. And then there's another two-part number.
Yes.
Two-digit number dash another two-digit number. What is
Perfect. That's a great question. So it's a 4-digit number separated by a dash, and actually you'll see sometimes we actually don't have that dash in there. The first 2 digits are just your precinct number. The last 2 digits are your legislative district. So it's a quick, easy way that we do our precinct lettering or numbering so you can better understand the district for which you live in.
And then those are good questions on the maps. We will, kind of the second part of our business after the introductory kind of ordinance stuff is really dig into the maps, and we'll answer more fully some of these questions, because that will make up the most significant part of our work is to try to map this out, right? So Todd, Todd.
One other thought on that area as far as the precincts go. These numbers in red, I assume, are the population for the entire precinct. So you'll be looking at the city limits portion of that. It doesn't specifically call that out in statute, but that, I think, makes sense. And you're establishing city voting districts, so you're looking at the city population portion of that number as you go through.
And then I think, Craig, maybe GIS can speak to, I think we asked for a filter on that, correct? So
Yes, that's actually what this is. We try to make this map as simplistic as possible. The red numbers are the city population only, not the total precinct population.
Yeah, and that took some work to do, but we were anticipating that one step ahead because, as was said earlier, a precinct from the county standpoint has people that live in the city, outside the city, but for the purposes of the state statute, it's city representation because city taxpayers are voting for city electeds to represent their taxes. And the census was 100,200 in the most recent. So we barely made it in. 201 fewer people, we wouldn't be meeting here doing this. But it was an inevitability. The next go around, we would have to be doing this. So 100,200 divided by 6 is, I think, 16,700. And we'll get into that more in the mapping, but you start doing some math and you start to think through what the representation is. And then maybe can you speak to the intent of why we do the census and the representation? Maybe just a very brief kind of civics lesson note on that and the significance of that, the legal significance.
Again, I think it comes down to trying to identify, at the state level, for example, it's identifying communities, common interests. In your case, you've got a city that's fairly cohesive, but you're going to have to divide it up into 6 ways. So I think those are the kind of things to keep in the back of your mind. Does this district meet the population? Is it kind of a cohesive unit that one person can come from that area and represent that district fairly well? But that's the idea, is to divide things up into reasonably similar population sizes to promote a balanced representation on the city council.
So is there any, are you able to factor in any of the current growth that's going on? So not necessarily projected growth, but we know a lot of these areas have already grown since the census and are going to continue to grow. Is that a factor at all?
So Kathleen, it doesn't call that out. It talks about the same number of people based on the most recent federal census. I think at the end of the day, that's what you look at, but I don't know that it's inappropriate to keep that kind of in the back of your mind as to the district boundaries. There's more room for growth here, there's not there. But at the end of the day, that's your legal test, whether it's a valid map or not.
Yeah, Mr.
Yeah, a similar question related to that. Are we going to take into consideration developments that have already been approved that we know they're going to have a certain build-out number into this?
So kind of a related question. I think that's something you can perhaps keep in the back of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And, if something, you've got a pretty short window here, so I don't know that population will change a lot on the precincts in the time frame you have to operate. I think that's more of a back of your mind thing. What you need to make sure when you ultimately approve the map is that they roughly contain the same number of people currently based on that census.
I live in the very southeast corner where it's kind of this bluish color where it says 4,094. Just to the north of that, there's a little green section, and there's been 2 developments approved already there that are going to, when they build out, they're going to have over 2,000 people there. And those are approved. So that's a pretty good sized number. Who knows how long that's going to take, years, I'm sure. But these are things that, do we consider that into this overall picture of known developments and kind of what the build out's going to be?
And just to clarify and piggyback off of that, do we have leeway within the language that's in the statute to take that into account? So if we have on paper that this particular district, whatever it happens to be, is light, because according to the census, there aren't that many people, but we know that 2,000 people are moving in tomorrow, will we get dinged? Does that make sense?
So the first thing is keep your precincts intact. And then outside of that, they need to have, to the extent possible, the same number of people. So again, that's your test. If you go really light and there's 2,000 people in this district and there's 5,000 in this one because you think it's going to grow more, that's probably not going to pass the test. So it's to the extent possible. I think you can keep that in your mind, but really it's focusing on the numbers in this census. And then I think it anticipates, maybe the district boundaries change with the next census as growth occurs.
Chris, did you have a comment?
Well, yeah, along those same lines. So I think it's highly likely that you'll end up with light areas, particularly on the outside of the city. So to me, it would make some sense to use that as a justification, let's say, that, well, we know this area will have growth. We know this inside area is built out and will not. So I think it's going to come down to that, where you have to make a justification of here to keep the precinct contiguous. And I think that's number one, has to be. And the geography should play, to me, a bigger role than the actual population. But the law's what it is, and you know how that goes.
Well, and just to clarify, at the end of this, we're actually could be presenting multiple different types of district maps, correct? So we could have essentially one that's a little bit highlighting into that aspect, and the other one is slightly different.
So I think that's a perfect segue maybe into going into our ordinance. The ordinance does contemplate putting maybe before the public for public feedback, more than one map, if you so choose to get feedback on more than one map. But eventually what this committee will do by resolution is recommend a single map that would be published for a public hearing for city council to adopt. It's not to give city council, here's 4 maps, pick one, right? So it's really to come down to one map that you're recommending to city council. So your binders has a copy of the ordinance 4657. You see that? We'll do a rapid. I'm not going to read word for word. Literally, it's a multiple page ordinance. I would recommend your homework to look at it. I just want to call out significant parts of the ordinance. The ordinance has been modified. Just if you haven't read ordinance language before, the strike-through language was because of a recent update. That was to bring it into conformity with state statute. As legal has already spoken to the state statute, it required some of these changes within our ordinance. So that first paragraph shows how it was amended. Just so you know, just very brief history, city council, when I moved here, there was 4 members on the city council. And then they went to 6 members. I want to say maybe it was 2012, could be wrong. Does anyone remember exactly the day we went from 4 to 6? I want to say it was somewhere around 2012, I think. We went from 4 to 6, and I don't think that was necessitated by a statute. I think that was a voluntary decision, a policy preference to say that the city of Nampa is large enough, we should probably have 6 representatives. And so It's not like we've always had 6 in perpetuity. It used to be 4, and then it went to 6, relatively recent, and it's 6 at large. The city gets to vote for all 6 seats. That's the current status quo. Obviously, that's going to change with this law. So it's not just, this is a little different than the county. The county commissioners have to live in a district, so there's a residency requirement, but the whole county still votes for all 3 commissioners. The city, you must have residency requirements, and the voting is going to be restricted, much like the state legislature, where you're voting for your representative. And so these council members are going to be representatives. I mean, they're still going to represent the whole city, but they're going to be directly accountable, responsible for that district that voted for them, because they're representing those people. So that is one significant change, is moving from at-large to districts, and some of the changes that are taking place in there. So the bottom of page 1, you'll notice that our ordinance establishes in subsection A, section 2A, the establishment of the committee. You are on the committee, you are here, so we've gotten through that process. The duties and powers under B talk about what you're charged and authorized to do via ordinance. You're to evaluate and apply federal census data regarding the city of Nampa in order to establish the 6 council districts. 2, you're to assign the city council seats numbering 1 through 6. So that probably goes without saying, but in order that there needs to be clarification, some of the council members were asking the same thing. Who are you determining who's 1 through 6? Well, 1 through 6, we just happen to seat people that way. 1 through 6, kind of left to right. You're going to determine that, and that's also going to be a significant part of this task. I don't think it would make sense to have like District 1 on the map, like 1, 2, 3, 5. So I don't know. I mean, you could, but I think we're going to have to provide a narrative at the end of the day. There's different ways of thinking about it. My mind goes to kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Some of you might be thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But once those district seats are named, that is District 1, District 2, District 3, or Zone 1, Zone 2, Zone 3. So that's Section 2. Section 3, you're going to act independently to make decisions regarding city council districts and city council seat numbers without regard for the residency of elected officials or candidates running for municipal office of the city of Nampa. And this is a significant call out. Read that. 3, the temptation might be, tell us where all the existing city council members live, and you might have 2 or 3 favorites on city council, and you're trying to split them up. It just so happens, because you might be curious already, I think 3 or 4 of our 6 council members happen to live all in the same precinct. There's going to be an unavoidable disruption to the city council seats over the next 2 election cycles. Yes?
And so my assumption is this is going to be for the next election. We're not going to have like an emergency election that's fill these.
Correct.
Okay.
No, unless the legislature does something. We can gather January through March, but
Let's not give ideas.
Don't give them ideas.
I don't need any new ones.
Tomorrow.
There was some consideration in a prior session about maybe trying to consolidate, to have all 6 seats in a consolidated sort of special election on an even year, but I think that legislation's off. So as far as my assumption, we're working under the assumption that our next election cycle is November of 2023. City council elections are on odd years. And I think seats 2, 4, and 6 are up. So Brunner, who's in seat 2, Reynolds in seat 4, and Bauer in seat 6. Those seats will be determined based on whatever zone 2, 4, and 6 are to be determined.
Oh, so it's not a fruit basket turnover then? So
No, it's
not
gonna be
everybody,
staggered.
okay.
So 2, 4, 6, and then in 2025, 1, 3, and 5. And then after 2025, we'll fully have transitioned to where all 6 electeds will have been elected based on representing.
So for a while, they'll still overlap, right? You could have 2 people from.
Yeah, you're going to have some 2 at large, and the hypotheticals, I can amuse you with the hypotheticals or bore you to death, but here's just one hypothetical, just for the sake of just brain exercise. So let's say let's say we get our districts down, and let's say in District 2, that's up next year, let's say, just so happens Haverfield and Bauer live in District 2, and Bauer is 6, and 6 would be up, and Haverfield's in 5, and he can finish out the remaining 2 years of an at-large election as a result of last year's election. Haverfield, as far as I understand the statute, he can choose to run for seat 2 if he wants to be elected in a new term in the new district, in which case, if he was elected, he would vacate seat 5, be elected in seat 2. If he were to lose the election, he would still finish out 2 years in that large thing. So I'd look to legal to probably clarify or correct that if that's.
I think that's correct.
Yeah. So I was thinking through a lot of crazy hypotheticals of what might happen. And you might have people who are currently in other districts running against each other for a new district. And if they lose, still get to finish out their at-large seat. And then if they were to vacate, the mayor would then have to appoint someone to that vacancy. And I'll be talking to Todd to ask if at that point it's an at-large vacancy or if the appointment should be someone who lives within the district having, we'll cross those bridges if we get there. So anyhow, there's a lot of potential chaos and disruption that will ensue, but it's not your fault. You're doing what the statute and the ordinance requires of you to determine districts. But there will be an unavoidable disruption that occurs because of it. So I'm going to skip over there. Again, homework, there's a lot of consult under 4, 5, 6, 7. The emphasis there is because at the end of this meeting, you're going to appoint a chair and a vice chair. We then assume the role of support staff to facilitate your work. I'm kind of as out of necessity serving as the facilitative chair now, but it will be handed over and then the work will be done. But I've taken the liberty to schedule the 4 meetings because of a logistical necessity to get the logistics, the scheduling, and make sure that our support staff will be ready to attend and to support with the resources needed. But the chair and the vice chair will have to lead. You'll see my role is kind of directing the chief of staff under CA. The mayor's already appointed members, 1, you're here. I'll skip over 2, the bottom of page 2. That just ensured that there's a geographic diversity represented among the 9 of you. We split the city into 6 areas and made sure that we got broad representation with 3 at large. So the organization and the ex officio officers on the top of page 3 are present. The city of Nampa engineer is actually Daniel Badger, and the designee Greg Carter works in the engineer's office. And these are non-voting members. We are support staff. City of Nampa planner Rodney Ashby, and I know it's Christy Watkins has also joined us, who works in planning, who's sitting over there. So the planning, the planning here is also to provide support staff. And as Todd said, keeping in the back of your mind maybe what permitting and growth has occurred. You can't count, we can't do our own updated census, I think is what I'm hearing. But we do know that there are more people who've built houses over the last 2 years. The census is already a little bit dated, right, from when they took that. So, but even the state legislature had to redo districts, but there's a variance, and maybe, I don't know, we'll cross that bridge. If you wanted to provide a narrative on a district that's, one district's 2,000 or 3,000 bigger than the other, but one's landlocked with no growth, and one has a lot of growth, and you already know there's growth. I don't know, we need to produce something that will pass the legal test, the statutory test, if someone were to allege that there's a violation, and that's why we have legal. So we want to make sure we're not getting in trouble, and you never know what citizen might think that this is a foul, illegal action that didn't meet the state statute criteria. The chair, under organizations and meetings, the chair is a voting, the city county clerk, I mentioned Chris Yamamoto and Haley Hicks and, what's your name again? We didn't get you, Randy Long. Glad to see you all here from the county. They have to administer the elections. And that's just another FYI. You're probably bright, informed citizens and already knew that. Some people think the city administers the elections. We don't. The county administers them. So they're the ones who recently put together, updated the precinct map. So we have a good, fresh precinct map that we're working off of. They're the ones who are going to have to hand ballots out into the precincts and help administer, so they're here as ex officio, and also to help make sure that we don't do something that's administratively unnecessarily difficult or impossible on their end to administer. So we appreciate your presence in these meetings. The chair's authority is designated on page 3. You're obviously going to prepare the agendas. We're going to work together. Whoever you elect as chair, I will be, the clerk will be. The clerk is charged with assisting the chair of this committee in preparing the agenda, the minutes, and working with the chair to make sure that the meetings are properly prepared in order. There's public meeting laws. We have to post the agenda by certain deadlines, all of that sort of work. So we are here to support the chair to make sure that the work gets done. The chair will sign any official documents. There will be a resolution at the very end of this where, there's a map that's recommended to city council and sent to council. I know under subsection 2 there, the timeline of meetings, I kind of took the liberty, I said that. If the future chair wants to ding me for that. We felt there was kind of a sort of a logistical necessity to try to just calendar our meetings. Okay, so to take the liberty to do that. But if the chair were to cancel meetings or something like that, I would, that's why we have a vice chair, and the hope is that we kind of keep to the schedule if there's going to be a quorum present. You are all voting members, bottom of 5. The scheduling of public hearings, the city, this committee will dissolve, page 4, section 7, after the work is done, and that's after you'll dissolve, you'll only be reconvened under the appointment of the mayor. There is a provision later in here that if council were to remand the map back to you, I think that was an option we gave them, where you'd be convened, but they would have to provide comment. It can't just be they don't like the map. There has to be some sort of legal deficiency in their opinion, and this same legal will be advising them on whether there's criteria that could be met in remanding back to us because of a legal deficiency, and I'm hoping that that's not the case. Amy Bowman, communications, just a brief call out on her. She does a phenomenal job keeping citizens informed about everything going on in the city. She is going to assist and help with getting some of this stuff on the website. So we're going to have a dedicated link. There is some interest in the community and the media in the work of this. The maps that you're going through as we kind of progress through this, we'll have stuff up on the website. We eventually will get to a resolution. Well, subsection 3 talks about establishing a resolution, but that's after public open houses, and I kind of skipped over that, but subsection 2 includes, I put in a minimum of 2 advertised open houses, and that was where I was looking to Amy to help kind of get the word out. That's where we envision maybe you have 2 maps, 3 maps. The draft map, S hypothesis, within bracketed, in numbered city council districts shall constitute the preliminary draft. Districting plan, the Nampa Districting Committee shall hold a minimum of 2 advertised open houses to provide draft maps and to solicit public input from Nampa residents. Those 4 meetings, including today, do not include the open house. The open house those 2 open houses would have to be scheduled at a to be determined date, and I was thinking between the date of your 3rd and 4th meeting. Maybe should have been clear in this ordinance. So this open house, is it actually a formal meeting of the district committee where a quorum would need to be present in order to have those open houses? Because what I had in mind was just having the maps open and the public offering comment. And then Amy, did you have a comment?
I think you have flexibility there. It says
Okay.
the Nampa Districting Committee shall hold.
Okay.
I don't think that means you all have to be present. I think you present what you have, and you can have some present, but it's really more about gathering the public input, and you have folks to help you with that. But you could be present if you wanted. If you were going to have a quorum present, you would need to notice it.
And we'll probably just we'll notice it because the intent of it is to advertise to the public, so we'll notice just to provide that provision. I just want to make sure that it was illegitimate if we didn't have a quorum present or something. Because the public input isn't where the chair is up here asking for input. It's really, we're going to try to facilitate where they can write comments, leave comments, and then we would compile that and as support staff, bring that into the next meeting and say, here's kind of what the feedback was. So, Amy.
Oh, my question was just making sure that this is basically one open house, 2 different times with the same information. We're not creating 3 maps and then we're going to narrow it down to 2 maps and then have another open house.
Correct, that was my
Okay.
intent. However, this committee and the chair may, don't know what we don't know. We've never been through this before. If the prudential guidance of the committee and the consensus was that there was a need to call additional meetings to gather more input. I just wanted to ensure a bare minimum of 2 open houses. It doesn't mean you can't have 3 or 4. But the intent was that the 2 open houses would be not progressive meetings of sifting or, voting down or voting off maps, but it would be replicate public meetings, probably within the same week or maybe even the same day, 2 times in the day, morning, evening, and offer it up. And again, it doesn't mean it to 2. We could even, if the chair, we could talk about having the maps maybe even at the library or at the rec center and have a comment box. But we will have at the bare minimum 2 advertised public houses, so no one said, I didn't know. I don't want to restrict it to members at the rec center or people who happen to go by the library. But there's nothing that I think prevents us from trying to solicit public input. But we'll have 2 formalized open houses, and then you keep us straight. There's something going astray.
If I can expound a little bit there, Rick. So Section 6 of the ordinance also notes that you have, as a commission, the ability or discretion in scheduling the public hearings, public comment, or presentation. When you're subject to the open meeting laws, that means you have a meeting that the public can come and watch, but that doesn't give them the right to comment. They have the right to observe. If you decide to have a public hearing, the only one that's required to have a public hearing is the city council later. But you could, if you want to, let the public come in and testify in addition to your gathering of information. Just, again, want to keep your timeline in mind. On the open meeting law portion, Rick covered a little bit of it. Char's here, the city clerk, as far as agendizing, noticing and everything. What you do want to be careful of is that there's not a quorum of you hanging out at the rodeo and you're talking business without having it on the agenda. And then you also want to avoid serial communications where you have a quorum of you all on a large group email and you're talking back and forth. That could be an open meeting law violation. So if you have questions or comments, do that one-on-one with staff versus sending a big group email and let that communication be at the one-on-one level. And maybe just a brief comment on public records as well. So your minutes and all those things are public records, as was commented. The emails that you send to staff, and perhaps if you do have a one-on-one communication or something. So anything you say in there, keep in mind that that's probably, say it the same way you'd say it here if people were there watching. And be cognizant of that. So, and how you phrase things and how you word your emails, that they could be subject to public scrutiny.
That includes notes that we write in here during these meetings too, as well, don't they?
Possibly. If you're taking notes as part of your practice, those could be subject to disclosure. You're keeping that as part of this. It's not part of the official record that we're keeping. We're just keeping minutes. And that's the requirement of the open meeting law. So.
All right, good. Yes, Chris.
Along those same lines, I might add something. So in the county, we got the redistricting. We got the redistricting late, and one of the reasons not the only reason, but one of the reasons was the census was late because of COVID. So the whole thing was delayed. So we get the districts, and our job is to put the precincts within those districts. What I'm going to tell you is my office spent zero, none, nada, no time, no effort looking at who was elected within any of those districts or precincts. What am I telling you? That played no role in how we set the precincts as to how it was going to impact any of those elected officials. Why am I telling you that? You have this 6 seats here. My suggestion to you is you do the same thing. Also, my suggestion is you avoid contact with these council people just for the sake of appearances, if nothing else.
That's good advice, and we'll try to remind, there is a level of interest from the council members in the work of this committee. We'll talk. I was gonna say, they should not have initiate any contact with you to talk about the work of the districting. You're nodding yes, so.
It's a should, they should not, just because it can reflect poorly on both of you. But you do have a directive in the ordinance that you can't consider where people live. So if they do, they're just raising the specter of invalidity of what you're doing. So it makes sense that they should.
Yes.
And I will add that I had one spouse of one elected official that contacted me with a suggestion as to where the boundary should be. I didn't even look at it, and I told that person via phone, do not do that again. This will not help you, it will hurt you. Stay clear out of that business.
Yeah, good counsel. I would hate for something to come up that would discredit the work of this committee. So I think that there's an ethical component that's just being underscored here. We just admonish you to maintain the statutory ordinance kind of requirements and the spirit of the ethical motivations, the spirit of the law that guides that. So, well, I want to kind of wrap this and move to the maps, but the open houses, the resolution will be, I believe it's filed with the clerk. I lost my place. Help me regather. Number 3. 3A, B, and C. That's the work. Those are the deliverables on page 4. A map, 3A, a map showing the exact locations of the designated city council districts, labeled with the district numbers and corresponding city council seat numbers, a description of the boundaries. The city council described by names of streets, other established features or landmarks, and a declaration that the city council seats shall be designated with numbers corresponding to like-numbered council districts. This will be transmitted by resolution to the city clerk. The city clerk shall then schedule a public hearing, make the resolution available on the City of Nampa's website, publish a notice of hearing on the matter before the city council. And it goes over some of the logistics of getting that onto the agendas and the city council. G, last page 5, will conduct a public hearing. Following the hearing, the city council shall review the district plan as established. Upon finding that it meets the criteria set forth in Idaho code, shall adopt it by ordinance as the final Nampa districting plan. Such act shall be ministerial function of the city council. Modification of the Nampa districting plan established by the Nampa districting committee shall occur only upon remand to the Nampa districting committee. The city council may remand the matter to the city council districting committee only upon a finding supported by substantial evidence that the districting plan established by the Nampa districting committee does not meet the criteria. The deadline on this is to get this done no later than 135 days prior to the next election, which is November of next year. I think the state statute says get this done 120 days before. The goal of the 3 cities, just so you know, Boise, Meridian, and Nampa are the only 3 cities affected by this. I've talked to them. We're trying to work we're not using that deadline as our, that's more like a legal, it needs to be wrapped up. The mayor and city council and the city, I think, would like to see this work done. When I say that, I'm not trying to pressure you to be expeditious in a sloppy way. To get this done, hopefully by the end of the year. My hope is that by the end of the summer, fall, and that the public hearing and that it's well established, because we're gonna have to do a lot of people start thinking about running, just to be candid, the beginning of the year in the spring. That's when people are starting to kind of think, and this is gonna be new. People are gonna start thinking, where do I live and what are the districts? We're gonna have to do a lot of PSAs. Citizens are not, the people I've talked to, they're not thrilled about being able to only vote for 1 out of 6 council members. There's some who might like that. I mean, you're gonna have 6 times the leverage now, but you only, there's all kinds of philosophical pros and cons along that, but we're just going to inform the public of what is, and we're just meeting the statutory criteria. So that's kind of a wrap on the ordinance. And so you have the statute, you have the ordinance, and this is signed copy. And before we go to the chair, I wanted to call out some other things in your binder. So if you look at the map that we've talked about, there's also, do you all have at least 9 committee members? And Jonica, I told her to make a puzzle. So we're not gonna craft today. This is kind of for homework, but you see those Ziploc bags? Okay, that's like, well, I don't know if it's not quite as big as the map back there, but it's bigger than our 8x10. She cut every precinct up to create map pieces. So that is this map cut up along all the precinct lines. And because the precinct lines don't have the street names necessarily on both sides of all the borders, so you know where the pieces kind of fit, she handwrote, you'll notice the street names and numbers on both sides of the pieces, so you know that they're matching accordingly. So one of the homework tasks for you to do before we come to the next meeting, and Craig Tarter, our GIS engineer, will compile a lot of the feedback. And of course, you're going to have a new chair who's going to preside over the next meeting. But I guess the homework that I'm charging you with in between this meeting and the next meeting is to just pull out a piece of paper, play around with that map, do some math, have a calculator, and do some combinations to see if there's some preferred things that you bring back to the next meeting. Yes, Stephanie.
A weird question.
Yes.
Is there a digital form of this same information that could be manipulated more easily?
We do. Craig Tarter has that resource, and maybe we need to talk a little bit more about the access of it to the committee, because up until now, there's like certain login permissions.
Can you just do a PDF of this?
Oh, yes, we can send you a PDF of that. Yes, and I don't know if there's a way to create an off the cloud with the PDF where people can maybe click on some things. So there might be the ability to gather some resources. I see you doing head nods.
So I deal with a lot of the GIS for the county. And I'm not a GIS person, so in talking to you, you're going to speak way over my head, but I know the surface pieces. But we also offer that interactive map, and those of you who probably have used it to look for your precinct and things like that, on that map as well, you can go in and depends on what layer you put on. If you put the census layer on, then you can actually like clip precincts, and then it'll actually give you the total of how many people live within the city limits within those districts. So there is something like that. I don't know if it is possible.
So I know that in the next meeting, I know that Craig, and maybe this would be a good segue, I'm starting kind of with the manual to the more complex, because there's, at the end of the day, as you probably gathered, this is really going to be a math equation. Math and maps is really, and again, that number, I just want to confirm, 100,200 divided by 6 is 16,700. Eventually what we'll do, I wanted to model it kind of after the state, and I didn't bring the state as a demo. let's say you have a district that's like 15,000 as you use it. There's no way, at least in the couple hours I played around, there's no way you're gonna have 6 districts that are 16,700. It's an impossibility unless you find it. Even if you gerrymandered, there's no way to have exactly 16,706 districts, okay? There's gonna be some variance from the most populous to the least populous. And legal will help to guide whether it's an acceptable variance and whether there's rational reasons in maintaining the contiguous nature or protecting communities of interest or barriers, are there natural barriers and how to do that. But that variance, we should show what the running total is and how much above or below it is that target 16,700. I think the state tried to stay at least a single digit variance. So I think 16,700, 10% of that would be 1,607. So if possible, I'm just giving you kind of what I'm hoping to see as the non-chair, just the facilitative person here, just to provide some context that the hope is that the variance is not 10% greater or more than 10% unless there's a very good justifying narrative. I think the burden would be on this committee to provide very strong narrative on why there's a variance in it. Maybe in the back of your head, we know that there's 2,000 more homes in this precinct that looks like it's underdeveloped, but we know that those 2,000 people are voting already and they weren't in the census. But we can't do an updated census to redo the numbers. So I think, yes.
So I don't know if this is even relevant, but it would be helpful to me to understand this part. Do we know where the urban renewal districts fall within this whole thing?
Those are good questions, Craig. Maybe I can hand it over to Craig because I know he has some layering. Those are good questions to get into I think this group, you're ready to jump into the workshop questions. I think those are relevant questions when you're looking at, and that's a nightmare too, by the way, because I was starting to think the same thing. And even just out of a curiosity, because we have fire districts now, we have school trustee zones, we have the county commissioner. There's 3. We have legislative districts. Am I forgetting anything?
Library district, cemetery districts.
Library, cemetery
Go on
district.
for a while.
Yeah, the highway districts.
Highway districts.
Highway districts.
Yeah.
What's that?
Irrigation.
Irrigation district. CWI trustee.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any collaboration that I'm aware of among the districts, and it creates maybe a nightmare. The real nightmare is for the elections office and making sure that the appropriate ballot is handed. And you might have different combinations of ballots within the same precinct.
Yep, up to.
Of certain people who live in the same a school trustee zone, but because they're probably working off the old precinct map, so I don't know when they convene to update theirs, but I'm guessing that, I don't know if the school trustees zones, for example, follow exactly the new precinct. They don't. So I don't know if you're following that. 2 of you might live in the same precinct, and one of you might get a ballot for this school trustee zone and one of you for another school trustee zone because they have a geographic distinction that's within a precinct. So, yes.
To even add to that, it could be something as similar as the even side of the road gets this ballot style up to this amount, and the odd side gets a different, but then those are split as well. So somebody saying my neighbor got a different ballot, sometimes they're right at the cutoff.
You're able to sleep at night.
A little bit. The dark circles, those are permanent.
There could potentially be, and I think our max has been 30, probably 35 different ballots within one precinct.
Yeah.
So it's not uncommon.
Yeah.
It's
So
what you're saying is, our goal is to keep within the precincts, but
Please.
if you decided to follow the school districts, you could.
You're following along kind of.
I don't know. I think that'd be illegal. I think
Otherwise,
it's
we
to
start
maintain
increasing the number of how many ballots are available.
We're trying to maintain the precincts as is. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, if you were to look to the school, like, that might be your idea, is like, how many trustees do we have? I don't know, 6, 5? You might think, hey, let's look at where those zones are and maybe just kind of work off that. And just anything that, not trying to negate that exploration as a thought exercise, you're just going to be left frustrated. But there was some thought, it would make sense if the highway districts or if the school and the new fire districts were somewhat similar, it would maybe make sense to try to maintain some continuity with similar districts, but what you'll find is it's just sorry, pun, across the map.
The boundaries are different. Nampa School District is not the same as Nampa City limits.
Correct.
true. It's
So
true.
it's not even just your 5 trustees, but.
And there's also,
Yeah, Valley.
The Nampa School District ends at,
yeah, there's
I-84.
Valley View
Yeah.
School
Oh, that- yeah.
District.
So
it's not gonna be-
Complicate
it's gonna-
things.
there's your 6th district
Yeah.
right there.
So, Rick, and
Yes.
maybe this is the next part, and I'm just jumping ahead, but I'm real curious about the layers we can throw over this thing. From the Nampa Chamber perspective, knowing where the zones are, because I can look at some of them and see right away, oh yeah, this is primarily an industrial zone. But also the demographics, are we gonna have access to all those layers? And Todd, are there any demographic issues we can't consider that you'd have a concern from a legal side?
So I think, kind of your communities of interest, and those are the kind of things that the state looks at that are okay. I would be real careful in articulating some kind of discriminatory reason. Like, we want more people of this whatever, ethnicity or whatever in this particular district. I'd stay away from those kind of things. But communities of interest, commerce, geography, roads and streets, those kind of objective things, I think are okay.
Subdivisions, I don't know if, have you retained the integrity of subdivisions that you're aware of within the precincts?
We try our best,
job.
absolutely.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah,
It'd be a nightmare for-
Like the section line roads.
Yes.
Most of them.
Yes.
we tried our
So
best.
That would naturally, of course, deal with that. It would be a very weird subdivision for it to, although there are some subdivisions that take on the same name, but do west, north, south. Now, I noticed in some of these others, that could be really confusing for people too. So, so those are some of the manual resources that are available, and I want to hand it over to Craig to pull up what we have on the GIS team. Are you ready, Craig?
Sure.
Okay. Is the screen sharing working? I think Mark could help with swapping. There we go. So why don't you, are you mic'd?
I think so.
Yeah. So I'm gonna just hand it over to Greg. Why don't you just tell us what you got and what capabilities you have to help guide. So the goal right now is not to spend, actually, I'm thinking we're not gonna probably go till 4 today. I had it blocked 2 to 4, but we're kind of a wrap now and then we'll break with the chair. I did not wanna have you do a full out workshop today. I wanted you to actually get familiar with the map on your own. Take that kind of cut map, see what capabilities you have so you know what you're coming into in the next meeting, and then really the next meeting in earnest be an actual workshop meeting where we're actually talking about running scenarios and you're all saying, hey, this is what I found, throw this up. And then Shar and Craig will keep minutes of various scenarios. We'll have to have some naming convention. Might be Johnson map 1, Johnson map 2, Castaneda map 1 or 2. And you'll find, I'm praying, you'll find that a lot of you are probably going to come with similar, that's what my hope is. And then we start to narrow from like 10 to 5, something like that. Yes?
So what we are seeing right now, is this a proprietary program, or do we have access to this same? No? Okay.
I'm going to defer to Craig, so go ahead.
Okay.
So this is an application that we set up. Right now, it's internal only. We'd have to look at our licensing, but we could set up something that could be available to this group or even publicly. We probably have to parse some of the data back and some of the functionality, but this is what we set up just with kind of our staff level understanding of here's what we think we'd like to do with this, this process. It's new to us as well, so we don't want to create something that's not functional yet. So with this map, this data is the same information that
We
was.
doubled in size, by the way, so I'm just kidding. You'll explain that properly.
This is the same data that's in the map that I printed out for you guys. This is the countywide, looking at all the precincts and the census data for the entire county. You can zoom in to Nampa a little bit. And right off the cuff, what we've done is set up some filters that will filter it down to just the precincts that are in Nampa and the census blocks that are within Napa city limits.
So by the way, am I wrong? Is there a discrepancy in the census?
There is a minor discrepancy because of the timing of when the census data was finalized and our city limits, because our city limits are a constant moving target and they don't always align with census blocks. So there is a minor discrepancy in their numbers versus what you'd see if you went to the census website and look at their quick facts.
So the 100,570.
There's a couple hundred.
So even if there's 300 divided over 6, we're just talking about like a 30, 35%. It's not going to be a significant adjustment to the target, so, okay.
And so within this application, we could go in and start selecting whole precincts. You can select just 1210, so here's your total value. You can start kind of pairing different precincts together, and here's your running total on the left. And with this, we have the ability, we can add other data to this. We can bring in other layers. Right now, I don't have anything in here, but we could bring in other district boundaries, other, imaginary lines in the sand to get perspective on where other highway districts are or any other layers that might be important to you.
Do you already have the Nampa School District boundaries in there?
Not in here yet, no.
Do you have any questions for Craig? And Craig will be present, one of the engineers, at our next meeting, and you could tell in real time, him just clicking a few contiguous precincts, that running total just adds up. And once it gets close to that 16,700 mark is when you know you're kind of at a, at kind of a stopping point, so.
Can we add some like points of interest on here? So like NNU, CWI, Idaho Center, would it be easy to add those on?
Yeah.
So we can see clearly where they
So,
have a rough idea.
Craig, would you be able to add those and save them as points of interest for this to be like a evolving?
We can, but I mean, to what value is that going to add to the map? I mean, because at the end of the day, we're focusing on the precinct boundaries. So if you're looking for points of reference, just so you can orient yourself, yeah, we can use different base maps for that.
Yeah, and just understanding, I mean, like the
Yeah.
question about the urban renewal district, that's more than just a point, but just getting that sense of where that is, how that tends to influence kind of neighborhoods and where that is in relations to precincts. I know that may cause me to, shift contiguity one precinct to the other a little bit.
Yep, for sure.
I did want to add really quick, when we created these boundaries, we did also consider, thank you, we also considered the school district. So we tried to follow the school district boundaries as much as possible when creating precincts. So I don't know if that's something that'll be helpful to the committee moving forward. So you'll see that as well.
So I know there's the admonition, the caution about sending communications outside of the meeting itself, but would it be valuable to everyone to come up with data points, types of information that we might want to consider and pass them along to whoever to get those added to the layers? So for example, median home price, median income, just general basic demographics, that type of thing. And how would we do that?
On the legal part, you're fine doing that, communicating to staff.
Okay.
And saying, hey, I'd like to see this or that. I guess as a group, maybe when you have your chairman and things, you can decide on how you want to handle that. Just as far as a value, economy of time and staff time and all of that, so you don't, have maybe a whole lot of work generated from one or two members of the committee. But yes, you can communicate with staff. There's no legal issue with that. It's more, and when you do that, again, staff can send you group emails. The challenge comes in if there's a response to things. Just try to keep that, yeah.
So we could request right now, can we get for each precinct, the median income and the assessed value of the homes within that precinct?
I don't
Those
know.
are two
I don't know if we have that information.
Not at hand, but we can get it.
You can get it.
And we don't have it at a county level. 'cause
I'm
we
not
look at
sure
those
what value
demographics.
that adds.
Yeah, you could group within, I mean, you could look at precincts and say, hey, these guys' homes are worth 700,000, these are worth 400. Is there a demographics difference between these neighborhoods? Should one precinct go to the other?
Since I'm not the chair, I'm just facilitating, I'm really gonna, out of respect for the future chair and the work of your committee and legal, maybe try to guide the exploration on that. I think, how relevant is the information on ethnic demographic or social class demographic or age? If you have, let's say hypothetically, most of our senior living was all in one precinct, how relevant would that be and how you match that or pair that? You're also gonna see a variance, just as a reminder, this is not registered voters, these are people. This, and in my household, there's 7 of us, and there's only 3 of us vote, right? So, everyone is represented, and there's certain areas where I'll tell you that the voting turnout is double other parts in the city, double or triple. So this isn't even gonna be reflective. Some people might scratch their heads and say, you got 6 even districts, but the voting turnout is double here than it is here. That's not gonna call into question the legitimacy of the election when you get there, but I don't know how relevant those sort of behavioral patterns are and how much you could project onto a committee. But that's just an FYI that, there's certain districts that are more engaged and show up and votes, and there's other districts that, aren't as engaged, but they're people and they need to be represented and they all count the same as far as for the purposes of the representation.
What's the criteria?
Yes.
Population.
Yeah.
Steph, go ahead. You're biting your tongue, or you're conflicted?
I am conflicted.
Okay.
I'm cautiously optimistic about this change to more representative representation within the council versus at large. And I'm wondering what the correlation will be between voter turnout and that direct representation. And I'm wondering how much of the non-participation is due to the fact that there's no one from my area there. Why bother? And that's why I think some of these demographic questions are significant, because who is speaking for me is a very important question that people often ask themselves when they go to the polls, or not.
I think there's a lot of interesting case studies that could be developed or dissertations on whether the direct representation actually encourages turnout. But I think at this point, from a social science standpoint, those are all interesting concepts, and I appreciate the concern to try to, the equity or the motivation to be publicly, public engagement, and how it connects to the motivations there. But I think that there is that challenge, again, of, at the end of the day, it's the number of people and having representation. There will be naturally, because there's 6, but I understand if there's a perception from the public that you have, most of your council members all live in the same subdivision and they all occupy a certain social class, whether there's parts of the city that feel disenfranchised because of that, or their vote doesn't count, whether they feel more empowered and all that. I think there's good people who can debate the significance of those things. I just know that the work of this committee, I don't know, I'd look to Todd to say, how much can guide kind of back in the head and the reason we wanted a diverse group here of different ages and different demographics is to try to be representative of the city's concerns and making sure that the city is equally represented across the board. So that's the goal, and it really is a math game. So, yes, Ray.
Stephanie, I might be a little oversimplistic on this, and I understand where you're coming from. I like to kind of look at this as, and this is all new stuff to me, districting, this is, everyone has an opportunity to vote. Whether a particular district gets represented more than another, they have the opportunity for someone in that district to notify them, I'm running for you. And we might overcomplicate things by getting a bunch of demographics involved. The guy with $1 million house, he's got to vote just like the guy that lived in an apartment.
Agreed.
And So I think if it's broken down into the areas that we're looking at, the districts, then whoever's going to run for that district, then he goes after the people in his district and say, I'm for you. This is what I'm going to do.
Agreed.
Does all this other stuff really
Well,
muddy the waters or not?
I think,
Information
I
is
don't think it
good.
should be the primary focus, but I think it can kind of, if there's a close decision, it could help clarify which direction to go.
I think communities of interest seems a little bit subjective, and I'd look to Todd to guide that when you do the work.
Well, and
I've
that's-
always wondered, what is a community of interest? How do you even define that? But it seems like the court, and there's case law that does take into consideration what that
I'll
means.
dig into that a little bit more, and we can talk about that, because I think if there is some challenge, they'll likely look at the redistricting at the state level to get some guidance. It's a different statute, there's more specific requirements in it, but that's kind of the potentially ambiguous one. My advice to you, again, is just to really try to keep it objective. Don't social engineer it too much, and criteria are, population and contiguous precincts. But I'll look into the community of interest a little bit, but like I said, that's not your main focus.
I just want to caution against leaning too heavily on zones, like school board zones, because as the city grows, there's a chance that those are going to change at some point as the population shifts, and same with fire zones and all that. So I think people are used to the fact that I'm in these 6, 7, 8 zones. You live 5 blocks away and you're in different zones. I think we're used to that. So I just don't want it to be too big a part of our decision.
Well, and I was going to add that I think one of the elements too, especially in here, I mean, I just look at this map, especially from when I grew up into this area, several of the communities have changed even from that timeline. So it doesn't take very much from within 10 years for a community area to really kind of essentially change. And we've also already talked about how there's some areas that may be more light industrial, but there's potential already for growth into that. So kind of leading back into that area where we're talking about, it's going to be a little bit of a numbers game, and now trying to figure out, well, we have to take more of the numbers of, okay, as a good example, 1610 is a great example to me, because I happen to know that area is a lot of industrial, but I know that a lot of apartments are going to be coming up into that area. So there's going to be potential for population growth. So there's some elements to take into that, but if we dig almost too deep into it, we can expand it into whatever different areas we want. And so it's going to have to kind of pull back a little bit, even though how much we want to dig deep into it.
I want to add also, I know this ending up in politics, but my suggestion, keep politics completely out of it. If you just look at a piece of paper and you cut it in a puzzle piece and you need it to equal a number, I mean, when we're doing 50, we have 51 now. When we're looking at 51 of them, you guys are looking at 6. I guarantee you politics, demographics such as that play no part in what we do. We literally divide numbers the best we can. Where, do we want them to pass over I-84? Do we want to keep them on this side of I-84? We don't want somebody to have to represent this area on this side. Because we also have to deal with precinct committeemen, so I would definitely take that in consideration. Keep politics completely out of it.
Yeah, that's just the best route.
So there are some natural, just noteworthy, I noticed some geographical boundary lines, 84, that's already there. Again, the county's already done the work of giving us the precincts, so they've already provided the puzzle pieces for us. The challenge is to put them together in ways that makes sense, where there's geographic proximity, of course. Whoever's gonna run has to represent people who are close to them, more neighborly. It's gonna create that sort of a dynamic, that relational dynamic. But it looks like 12th is a natural barrier here, kind of east-west. There is, you'll have to blow up 4113 and 4313. I don't know how that cut works on 12th.
On Roosevelt?
Is that what's going on there?
Legislative districts. Yeah, because we're not allowed to
that was the
split legislative districts, so they had to
But
stay
you
within.
preserved, because you had to preserve the legislative districts and then cut precincts that maintain
Yeah.
continuity with those.
And
Yeah.
keep commissioner districts in mind as well.
Yeah, there was just an interesting,
split.
and I know our streets are weird, our streets kind of go north-south and then they go kind of. Northeast, but that's
We
where it
built
is.
out and then we changed our minds. It's like, oh, turn west.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
talking about right
Yeah.
there. You
Yeah.
see how that little corner from, is it 3112 or? Yeah, 3112, which is,
Yep.
it cuts in, but
Right.
I'm guessing that's a little subdivision or a tract of homes that kind of fit within the street.
Yeah,
Those are streets there, I'm guessing.
It's this one right here.
Right.
It's.
Oh, yeah, so
Yes.
3112, so you'll notice 12 is the legislative district, and then 34 just underneath it. 41 and 43 are both legislative district 13. So that's why that
Yeah.
split is weird like that,
Weird
is
to
because
follow.
of the commission at the state level.
Wait, is that clear, Greg?
Yeah.
Because you see how the pink goes above?
Yeah, that was a headache. I know.
So, well, that's gonna be, so when we talk about council districts and maintaining, not all three of those districts might be one district. Like two of them might
Right.
be part of one district. So the people in that pink area above the black line, in that triangle, they're part of the peak precinct.
Right.
I just,
Yeah.
for
Isn't that just the
clarification.
Hasbro house?
Yeah,
I don't believe
that's,
that lives there.
yeah, I was gonna say.
Well, that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
All right, sorry, so I told Jonica to cut as close as possible because she was asking, she's like, I'm confused, the color of the line. I'm like, just cut, we'll provide the clarification, but we're probably talking about a couple homes. So, but just to be clear, that pink, if you live north of that black line in that pink, you're actually voting with the precinct below. Okay, all right, that's good clarification. I think that was the only thing I eyeballed that needed some clarity, but you will probably come into the next meeting with some questions if you find some more things, so. All right, well, this was productive. I want to respect your time. We're at about 3:22, and I've covered all the stuff I wanted to cover, and I look forward to the work of the future meetings, which will be led by a chair and a vice chair. So I guess as my final action today, it's to call for nominations for chair and vice chair. And we could go around the room and see if there's anyone who would be interested in serving. I already see some people saying, I'm not interested in serving. Okay, there are some people who are interested in serving.
The only question I have in regards, because I am a city employee, if I did internal emails, I could not use my city employee. I'd have to use my Hotmail account and stuff like that because of public record, right?
So if there's a policy where you don't use your city email for outside business.
Correct.
That's one
Yep.
thing. This is city-related business, if you're on a committee that's appointed that way. But either way, your emails related to this, even if they go to your private email, are considered a public record.
Correct.
So, it's more city policy.
Yeah, I just don't want to cause a conflict of interest in regards to that.
Yeah, you're not here as a city employee, you're here as a citizen, so.
Okay.
Probably best to use your private email.
Yeah. So I think what we do is call for, a nomination for the two, and then, I don't know, legal and the clerk would have to help me. If we have several people who want to serve, I guess we do one motion for one person. If it succeeds, then we have a chair. If it fails. But if there's 2 or 3 people who want to be chair, how do we do that, Todd? How do we administer?
Before we get there, can we,
arm wrestle.
maybe we just ask who's willing to and who doesn't want to, and we might just narrow it down to 2 people.
Right. Sounds like you've done this before. So who would be open? I mean, one is someone who would be committed to attending all 4 meetings. That would be my request for the chair and vice chair that has no conflict. Someone who has experience chairing. I'm not trying to preclude someone who's not chaired a meeting before, but I think chairing a meeting brings some helpful experience into this work because of the more formal nature of this committee and what's at stake and what's being handed off. But again, I'm not trying to discourage interested parties, but if you're interested in attending all the meetings, know for sure that there's no conflict and that you'll be here. I think that would be helpful and if you're interested in serving.
Can you remind us the dates? They're in my calendar, but without looking them up, I don't remember what.
12, 26
You have
of
them
this
all.
month.
9th and the 30th.
Yeah.
She has them all.
So 12
July 12th, July 26th, August 9th, and August 30th. And they're all at 2 PM.
So you also asked a question if we've had experience chairing
I said it'd be helpful, but I'm not trying to direct an outcome. I don't know who has experience or doesn't have experience. It's helpful if someone has chaired a meeting before and knows how to facilitate comment deliberation, stay germane to the topic at hand, not chase rabbits, or entertain chasing rabbits.
I will throw my name out. I serve as the chair of the Nampa Chamber Government Relations Committee. I serve as city attorney for some other cities. I'm used to that. I'm happy to serve in either role if we need somebody. So.
Okay, we got one willing person.
And I've chaired in a committee with the Village Charter School at Boise.
Okay, so we got a couple people.
And I conduct agendas and inspections for all of our industrial users. I hold meetings, I do site inspections, so I'm in the trenches with the people as I go and inspect.
And that's in your city job, right?
Yep, in my city job.
Are there any concerns about conflict? I'm sorry, just having this out in the open because we should.
No, I totally
City
understand.
employee. Okay.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Wastewater position.
Okay.
I am not interested.
Ditto.
Okay. So I think we've heard, I think we have 3 interested parties and we have 2 positions.
So I will nominate Adrian to be chair and Troy to be vice chair.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second to have Adrian. How do you pronounce your last name?
Castaneda, I typically just go by Adrian, so.
Castaneda to serve as chair and Troy Minnick to serve as vice chair. So that's been motion second. Any discussion? If there's no discussion, then I'll call for, is it a roll call vote or just okay, I'll ask the clerk to.
Castaneda.
Yes.
Berlin.
Yes.
Benz.
Yes.
Tuck. Aye. Booz.
Yes.
Minnick.
Yes.
Zornick.
Yes.
Cleaver.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay, we have ourselves a chair and a vice chair. We will be
You
in touch with the chair. Is it, okay, it's good for us to CC the vice chair?
Yeah.
Correspondence.
Yeah.
Sorry, what did you say? Okay, so we need a,
Can I ask one question?
yes, Amy.
So the open house, so that I can start,
Yes.
would it be at the next meeting that we can determine an open house date, or is that too preliminary? Because you said between August 9th and August 30th would be a potential open house.
I would hope that maybe the chair is one of the agenda items and whether that they can identify a time between August 9th and 30th at the next meeting. Because I know identifying on August 9th that would be a really quick turnaround. I mean, you could within August 9th. The thought was that there's a 21-day split between the 9th and 30th. So even if on the 9th you said, let's do them, I would want at least a week prior to the 30th to compile some of the comments from the staff side to try to have Amy Bowman identify some word clouds or thought clouds of similar feedback that emanates through that. So
that
yes.
really looks like the week of the 15th then. Really, that makes the most sense.
I did want
That's what I was thinking.
to make a mention to the chair that we do need to get together and decide what's going to be on the next agenda, and that needs to be posted next week.
And the agenda can be it could just be workshop. I mean, the action item right now is it's a workshop. If there's an action that you want specificity on to call the dates for like, that could be agendized. But even that's an administrative, logistical function, but we will get together or talk to you to make sure that we'll have minutes from this meeting that will be distributed next meeting, and of course, you'll accept the minutes and then proceed. But Craig will be here on the next, July 26th, and if you agree with kind of my homework assignment between now and the 26th, so in 2 weeks, it's to take out an old piece of paper, a calculator, and probably come to, and I would just encourage the chair in the next meeting to maybe go around the room and kind of solicit what contributions the committee has as far as ideas or thoughts, or maybe someone finds 6 that are 16,700. And then we're done. Well, not quite.
Since I guess we're following real rules now, Chairman, may I?
I don't think I'm still chair. I think he still has it for.
Your chair, we
Oh,
voted.
now I'm chair. All right.
I would suggest that we come to the next workshop with 3 maps that we would like to consider. And at that time, we could compare all the 3 maps, and who knows, we might be done within an hour of starting that next meeting.
Not probable.
Possible.
I like the optimism.
Yes, that's good.
Do we need a formal motion for that?
Yeah, we do need a motion to adjourn. So if,
So
if,
moved.
if you're the chair, okay.
Second.
Okay.
And you could call for. It's been moved and
Then
seconded.
so we've gotten a second, so all those, we don't have to vote for that point.
Voice vote.
All right, then the meeting's adjourned.
We haven't voted yet. You have to call the vote.
Okay, so I do still have to. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned
Okay.
at 3:31.
All right, very good. Thanks. Gave you back a half hour.